that's kind of the point, is to try to like maintain ourselves in like within a kind of mystery that is endlessly generative.
For me, like whenever someone says, like you can listen to anything, like someone says, like put something on Spotify and you can listen to anything, my mind goes completely blank. So when it comes to like starting up an album, do you guys have like, what the fuck do we write? Or is it just kind of like, how does that sort of work really?
I think the simple answer is no, which is wild.
Because the process of writing never really ends for us. There isn't ever a point where it's like, oh shit, it's time for a new record. Things already exist. They're like floating somewhere in the ether, and they start to once we decide to start getting together and playing with the intention of writing, I think. And coming with ideas that have felt, for lack of a better word, like magic, I think. So there is this like mystic element for sure of, we play something, it feels new. It feels like, for me personally, I like, and I think that all of our songs, like there's some other that they touch, this other, I don't know, essence or like entity or something. And for me, that's how it all begins. It's like this part or the sequence of parts makes me feel something, whatever that is. Everything kind of has to build upon itself and continue like massaging the fire that's burning. It's like trying to keep a campfire burning.
Yeah,
It's a little Boy Scout or something. It's like, all right, we have this riff. The first riff is like a tiny flame, and you have to keep tending to that to make it actually grow into something. And if you put the wrong thing there, often the fire is out, or if you make a mistake. And I think that's often how it feels in writing our new songs. Like I want them all to feel that blaze.
I think that's true. I also just want to say, I find choosing a song in a car, like have Spotify put in my lap, infinitely harder than this process that Matt is talking about, which is crazy because like I have no idea where these, like Matt's making the point that like all we really need is like a seed that germinates, right? And then we have like a reaction to it. And that is, when you're in a room with a bunch of people who are this willing to just like go off the cuff most of the time, it's kind of like it's often an improvisatory situation, or a part that turns into an improvisatory situation. It's just so easy. Like all we have to do is hang out. And I feel like that's pretty much the conditions for it happening, as opposed to being like, what's the concept? What's the sound? Like, what can we add to this machine we already have? Like, none of that. I think if we did that, we would be making worse records.
I'll kind of move on to some of the themes on the record. So would you guys be able to explain some of the themes that are explored on Ontological Mysterium?
Well, I think a good place to start with that question is just, well, with the title itself. And the title track, I wrote the lyrics to the title track, and at the time, sort of the backstory is just like, I don't know, I was feeling some like writer's block, and I just didn't have like the inspiration for I didn't have like, what do I want this song to say? We have like the music, but I don't know what like verbally I want. And I started thinking about like, okay, like why am I having trouble coming up with this? Like I didn't used to have any sort of block like that. I could just be creative. And I just kind of like got it in my head that like, oh, it's because like I used to be younger, and when you're a kid, you just have like a more vivid imagination. And now I'm like old and decrepit and my brain sucks or something. But I ended up using that concept as the springboard for the lyrics. And so it kind of, tells the tale of like the emergence of like life, and growth and transformation into something that is like uncontrollably reproductive, which essentially turns into its own demise as it grows, like from conception to ultimately death. But during that process, it becomes something new. So like at the end of the song, it's like a monument to what it was. And that transformation sort of became, it's a theme that we noticed in a lot of the other lyrics that the other guys wrote. And so that sort of like the origin of the specific title, we felt that theme sort of fit a lot of what we were writing, and it wasn't like a preconceived theme. We were like, oh, this album's going to be about transformation or something. It's kind of just like, in a lot of cases with our albums, we notice a theme after the fact, which again sort of gets back to that sort of like the mystical aspect that, I don't know, we're like grasping somehow, tapping.
In terms of like the question of like, what is the ontology of this record, or like of us as players or whatever, like there's actually like, there isn't an answer really. Like it remains in this space of mystery. And like, that's kind of the point, is to try to like maintain ourselves in like within a kind of mystery that is endlessly generative, you know, like it wouldn't be able to continue to provide us with energy to make things if it's settled in one place, whether even, you know, you can't move on. You can't move from a settled position. You know what I mean? Like you can't go anywhere when you've like locked yourself into a particular ontological status. Like you need to be able to remain flexible.
So kind of the blaze is almost kind of like the big bang, and then the death knell is sort of the end. Is that kind of how it works?
I hadn't thought about that question.
I have not either, but I love the idea. And because the second track on the record, which is really like, I mean, the blaze is an intro of sorts. I do like kind of the sunrise imagery too. So you have the subtitle of track 2 is the archaeology of dawn. I like that read, the beginning and the end.
So the question is like the death knell ringeth, right? Like what is dying? Like what's being ended in when we're thinking about that track. And it's not the album that's ending. It's not the death knell of the album. It's the death knell of like a certain, like it's the last breath of an old self and like the sort of like proud roar of a new one. You know, like I think that there is like, again, like a question, a mysterious question sort of like haunting the band at the close of that song, sort of being like, well,
one of the really rewarding things about doing interviews like this is I think it gives us a chance to even like sit and reflect on what the hell that we did, you know? It's like the story almost comes afterwards, and it's like watching these webs of I don't know, interconnectedness, or these webs of like relationships between songs, between sounds, between lyrics. There's this element of us being a part of the tumult and the chaos, I think, of the making while it's happening. And then it's not until afterward, when the thing is done, that we can analyze it and like look at it from different angles.
It's kind of not yours anymore, you know, because it's out in the world. So like people can do with it whatever they sort of interpret it, which I can imagine is probably a bit scary.
To have like the paradoxical relationship of being like no interest in controlling the narrative, also being jarred by some of the narratives that do get conjured, and being like, I don't know if that's exactly it. Like,
Yeah. I actually recall once, I mean, some of the narratives are like actually painful to us sometimes. We're like, oh man, I hate that that's what they're hearing. But I do actually remember a time someone emailed us and proposed that Anaretta was this like massive concept album about a character like going through this insane journey, and it was so incredible. It wasn't like a 2-sentence thing. It was like a page and a half of this guy explaining how everything tied together. He was like, "Is this what you were going for?" And we were just like, we were speechless. I had no idea what to say. You know? And I do love that aspect too, where it's like the story kind of, we aren't the only storytellers here. I think everybody who hears it and says something about it is part of that story.